I'm going to try to show you where the dimensional field, what the structure of dimensions are, where time plugs into that structure as far as time cycles and our like larger and smaller time cycles. I'm going to teach you a little bit about matter density levels, because these things will help you to understand not only who you are and where you fit, but it'll help you understand the ETs, who they are, where they fit within the spectrum, where they're coming from. Okay? We'll get into, after we get a little rundown on that, we'll go into where visitors come from and what the primary races are that are involved here. So we know who the other players are in this drama, and we can get an idea of what their agendas are. So if we're having contact, or if we know people who are having contact, we will be more educated in being able to assess maybe what kind of contact that is. Because some kind of contact you're better off without. And a lot of people become attached to the fact that they have had contact, because that in itself is a remarkable phenomenon if you don't realize you're a multidimensional being yourself. If you forgot that, it's amazing when something from higher spaces comes down and talks to you, But it's not always as wonderful as it appears to be, because sometimes they're talking to you in order to manipulate you. You can disassociate from that type of manipulation without giving up the wonder of contact, because there are many positive races of beings out there that will be willing to establish a rapport with you. So you don't have to give up contact if it happens to be a manipulative group, and there you are, you're back to being a regular human being who doesn't have contact. Once you're a contactee, you will always be a contactee. It's a matter of opening your perceptual fields, and once they're open, they very rarely close again. So you don't have to worry about, well, I've been talking to reptilians, for example, and okay, I'm finding out that they're running an agenda that's about trickery, and it's really not good for our race, but I'm attached to them. They teach me things, and they know more than I do. You don't have to position yourself anti-anything. You just need to position yourself with wisdom. Just like if you were dealing with a person who, because they had some messed up ideas, were abusing other groups of people. You can still love them. That doesn't mean you condone their actions. And it doesn't mean you let them suck you into their agendas. If you can, you try to show them a better way. And if you can't, you need to let them be what they are and find other people that have a higher level, a higher perspective to follow. So when I'm trying to show the differences in agendas and the differences between humans that are affiliated with the different ET races, I'm not trying to separate people or try to get people to point fingers at good guys and bad guys. There are agendas. There are agendas that are good for humanity, and there are agendas that are not good for humanity. The people who are running those agendas are all part of the whole. Just like if you look at a room full of children, let's say, and you have some really outrageous children that are harming other children, you try to separate them from the other kids, but you don't damn the children. They need guidance, okay? They need to grow out of those behavior patterns. This is the perspective I come from when I'm looking at the ones that are running negative agendas. So as we learn more about who the races are, what their manipulation tactics are, now it helps know how they manipulate, so you can watch for those signs, so you don't get suckered in, to put it very bluntly. Because right now, there's so much trickery going on, particularly within the New Age movement. That was a movement that was meant to unite people. It was meant to bring back the ancient truths and the ancient sciences, and right now it's being used, it's being infiltrated and twisted in a way it was not intended to go. And that's very upsetting, because it was meant to unify people, and it was meant to bring them together in light and love and Christ consciousness, and it is not able to do that right now because of what is happening with infiltration. So in this program, we're going to find out a little bit about first of all, what the eight primary methods of visitor contact. Some of the ways that visitors are making contact. And some people think that, well, probably most people in this room don't, but a lot of people at UFO gatherings don't realize that things like channeling and all those angel channels and all those kind of things, they think it's something different. They think it's people are imagining it. It's not. This is ET contact happening as well. So we're going to find out some of the primary methods that they use for contact, not just spaceships coming down. We're also going to find out the 7 primary methods that visitors use for manipulation. These are those little things they do to us that we don't realize they're doing that really mess up our own evolutionary program. If we can realize that every one of us came into this incarnation with a purpose, we chose to incarnate, and there's no exception on the planet. There's only one way to get here, and that's to choose to come in But when we come in to manifestation here, into the gene code, lights out, we don't remember who we are. We get an identity put on us by our parents, who probably don't remember who they were either. And we learn to live this life of personality that it has parts to do with us, and we have a sense of self, but there's this huge part of self, the part of self that knows why it chose to come, why it chose to be born into the type of body that it's in. This whole portion of self is still out there. If we can learn how we're being manipulated to make sure we don't remember those things, we can learn to sidestep. So that's why I address things like, what are the primary methods of manipulation? So we can find counter strategies. And the biggest counter strategy is simply awareness. If somebody's telling you to surrender your power to some ascended master, some god, some, a lot of them are like the ancient Egyptian gods coming back to talk to us and all this kind of stuff. Some of them are legitimate contact, some of them aren't. You need to ask questions. One of the biggest things I always stress is that I don't care if it's Jesus, I don't care if it's the big God of the universe come down, manifest, standing in my face. If that thing is telling me to hand over my power, you're pathetic, you're little, and I'm going to run you around, there's something wrong with that being's thinking. And I don't care what image they give you. One of the biggest forms of trickery that's happening now is having ETs come in as religious figures. Okay? They're doing holographic inserts. They're manifesting themselves as Jesus, as Moses, as the prophets, as all sorts of things that resonate with our ancient history. And they're saying, this is who we are. I'm Mother Mary, I'm Father Joseph. Some of them are connected incarnationally and actually are incarnations of the beings that were those persons. There's a whole group of other ones that are using the same faces and the same names and the same lines that aren't those people at all. So these are some of the distinctions. If we're going to become empowered, we need to be aware of, not afraid of. And it's not meant to make you paranoid about everything that decides is going to tell you it's an angel. We tend to, in the Guardian Alliance, we tend to not use the term angel because it's been abused so many times. And angelic consciousness is really anything from 6th to 9th dimensional consciousness. It is an ET consciousness. That's it. Angels, ETs, they mean the same things. And this is one thing if we can realize, if you start getting angelic contacts or something, or angels whispering in your ear, you can still ask them, okay, well, what's your resume? What dimension are you transmitting from? What are your intentions? You have a right to question. We're taught in this society to not question authority. The doctor tells you this, you do that. The teacher tells you this, you do that. We're not taught to think. We're taught to not think. We're taught to follow orders. This is being played on right now. Okay? Sure, we just tell them this and they'll follow orders. We put ourselves in a position of authority and they will follow blindly. That's one of the things that the negative ETs are counting on. We've been raised as sheep, so they expect us to behave as sheep. We don't have to. Sheep is a choice. We don't have to play sheep. And that's one of the things I try to get across to people. It is very confusing to try to be empowered if you don't recognize the rest of your multidimensional structure. We're in the middle of an interdimensional, stellar, I wouldn't call it battle yet, conflict, let's say. If we are not willing to learn what multidimensional means and to learn about the science of interdimensionality, we're really going to be at a loss because you're not going to be able to handle yourself with empowerment in a multidimensional battle when you're dealing with three-dimensional consciousness alone. So one of the things we try to teach is DNA strand activation in order to bring back the perceptions of the higher dimensional fields. So you can start looking at the fourth dimensional field and start seeing again. So you can open the ancient eyes, where we used to be able to run frequency scans up and down the matrix, and we could, see anything in the dimensional fields that we wanted to while we were in body. These are some of the things that we work to do. I will be doing some techniques tonight that help begin that process for people who want to participate in it. Okay, we're going to learn about the internal, what I call internal scalar technologies. Internal, that means it comes from inside of you. You don't need a laboratory and a bunch of fancy equipment to use scalar technology. What we don't learn in school here, we really should from the time we're in kindergarten, is that every time we think a thought or hold an image in mind, we have created a scalar pattern. Now, I will explain in the beginning a little bit more about what a scalar is, what scalar waves are. Okay, so that will give you more of an understanding of what I talk about when I say thoughts are things. This is one of the things that are truthful that you'll hear in the New Age movement. Thoughts are things, your beliefs create your reality. Yes, they do. Okay? But there are specific laws of physics that govern this process. And if we become aware of our interdimensional selves, we will become more functional in using those processes of physics, our natural birth rate. Okay. So one of the things we're going to learn here is called the Maharic seal. It's a bioregenesis technique, and it does many, many things. It's a 12th dimensional frequency seal, first of all, that you can, on your own, erect within your bioenergetic field. It's a part of your natural anatomy that has been dormant. It has been dormant in humankind for at least 10,000 years. It is not that hard to restart it. It has to do with the template of light and sound and scalar waves that our manifest form builds up on. Behind the DNA, there's a DNA template of vibrational patterns that form a fixed grid of light and sound. And this template of energy, is the key to regenerating anything within the body. When we begin the process of using the Maharic seal, and there's like several versions of this, I will run you through a quick, easy one here. Within these packets, if anybody wants to get them, we still have them at Kinko's, but they'll be coming if anybody wants to get them. It will be in written form. It's the short, faster version, and then in one of the programs we introduced, that's a whole other thing unto itself, called the Cathara Biospiritual Healing System, we introduced the long version, which is a really intensive version. This technique alone, if there's any one technique you were going to learn, this is it, because this is the only thing that's going to get a 12th dimensional frequency scalar field moving within your bioenergetic field. 12th dimensional frequency is the first point where polarization, electrical, magnetic, ceases to be, and it goes into an antimatter state where energy is no longer polarized. That is the level that is associated with true Christ consciousness, for when you unify the two polarities, electrical and magnetic, you end up with a unified whole. Now, when we're applying it to the bioenergetic field, we are creating in the bioenergetic field the strongest frequency that the body can hold. The human imprint was built on a 12-strand DNA template. That means it has the capacity to hold 12 dimensions of energy within it. Each strand template goes with one set of dimensional frequency bands, one dimension's worth of consciousness. Now, when we're dealing with the Maharic seal, you're bringing into activation the 12th strand and parts of all the strands down from there to build a frequency pillar. When you look in somebody's bioenergetic field and do an energy scan on the higher dimensional fields, people who have activated the Maharic seal will have literally what looks like a pillar of light forming in the field. And all the ancient ascension trainings and the spiritual stuff, they used to teach you about this in spiritual terms, but there's also a scientific equivalent. And right now, this is one very practical spiritual application, because if you have that pillar of frequency, of scalar frequency in your field, you will not be susceptible to electromagnetic pulse technologies such as the HEART project, those things that are being directed at you by the One World Order people. Okay? Scalar pulse technologies are another thing that the Illuminati and human governments are using, and they're planning to instill mass mind control. The only people that's going to work on are the people who are still functioning on third strand DNA. If you can get your fourth strand to start activating by using certain techniques, and the Maharic seal is one of them that will start all of the strands simultaneously beginning your activation cycle, you will progressively be able to hold those frequencies that would block your natural brainwave patterns, hold them out of your biofield. It creates a natural immunity to manipulation, and not just to Illuminati human government manipulation. The ET intruder guys, now we have intruders in the dimensional scale from the 11th dimension on down. A lot of people, particularly in the New Age, seem to think that once you hit D5, you're in Christ consciousness and everything's perfect after that point. That is not true. D12 is where polarity stops. And while you have polarity in electromagnetic form, you will have conflicts and you will have polarity dramas being played out. So as long as we can start to run the 12th dimensional frequencies into our biofields, we will build progressive protection from manipulation. But the exciting part about it is, once that's taken care of, it's also accelerating the entire process of integrating your higher dimensional identity. It is helping you to reclaim your own spiritual identity. Now, spiritual is simply a word to describe usually the stuff that we don't really know what it is. That stuff that's beyond our physical senses. We sense it's there, but you're not really sure what is spiritual. It has to do with spirit. What is spirit? Good question. We teach a program called Tangible Structure of the Soul. where we show in energy terms what those higher dimensional portions of your own identity are. So all of a sudden, spiritual is not a vague concept. It is a concrete thing that has a real form. And once you know that form, you can use the mechanics by which that form functions to begin expanding your own spiritual consciousness. It will increase the health in your body as you do this. Because originally, our first, as we entered as consciousness into the time systems, we, at the 12th dimensional level, there's something called the perfect imprint for health. That's before polarization began distortion of our full identity pattern. We have a perfect imprint for health for our bodies. The more we work with techniques such as the Maharic Seal, we are progressively stimulating into activation the imprint for health within the template of the body and the DNA. And it doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to bang, use it, and then you're fixed in the morning. It's not a quick fix pill. It's a progressive usage of energy to create progressive strengthening and realignment of the templates of the body. The templates of the body are what the matter base manifests on. The reason a lot of healing doesn't work is because they fix the outside, but the template is still distorted. If you don't fix the distortion in the templates, it's just going to remanifest itself. In our society, they cut organs out. And what that does is make more distortions in the templates. That's why people will get one organ taken out, and then a few years later, something else will go wrong. And then something else. How many organs can you take out before you have nothing left? With allopathic medicine, it is a problem because it is not healing the issue. It is simply, cutting off the hand that offends you. And eventually, you cut enough things off and you don't have any body left, and that's what's happening. So when we're dealing with these technologies that will give us protection from ET, we're also dealing with technologies that hold a promise for our whole species, whether or not you can believe in ETs, that it's a promise that hasn't been here for thousands of years, because this knowledge has been lost and buried for thousands of years. Okay, when we get through with the Maharic Seal technique, I'm going to get into 5 techniques for visitor differentiation. Okay, now visitor differentiation is being able to tell by the frequency of the consciousness of a visitor. It doesn't matter if it's a physical body in front of you, or if it's something floating around in your room that you sense is there but you can't see it. There are ways you can start to get some information about, is this something I want near me or isn't it? So there are some techniques that I'm going to talk about, and then in these packages I have them written out, again, in long form for anybody who wants them. I'm thinking that I would like to be able to give these to you guys. Usually we have to cover the printing cost, that's why we sell them. But I'm going to see if I can find a way to have them as handouts, because these techniques are invaluable. If you would take even just these home with you and work with them, you can read the techniques onto a tape recorder for yourself and make your own tapes and just listen to them. Even if you can't remember all the steps, just follow them as you're listening to them. You're still making the changes in the energy in your bodies. So this is going to be a unique ET workshop, because it's not just going to teach you about ET. It's going to teach you about the extraordinary parts of your own self and how to bring them back in the body to help you handle this whole drama. Because once you realize that you are a multidimensional being yourself, once you realize you have a soul, you have an oversoul, you have an avatar level of consciousness, and you have a rishi level of consciousness, all with you right now. They remember you. Those parts of yourself know you. It's just you down here because of the DNA that have forgotten those parts of yourself. When you realize that you have this eternal consciousness and the knowledge that it can access, you no longer look at ETs as gods that you fall down and worship. You no longer look at ETs as something you have to be terrified and go hide under your covers from. You become empowered. This is why in the New Age movement they say something is true. Spirituality is the only real fix for any of this. They're absolutely right. But what they seem to not be teaching anybody is what precisely is that spirituality that they're pumping so wonderfully. Why aren't they teaching dynamics? Why aren't they teaching the tangible structure of the soul? This is what I ask a lot of times with a lot of the other people that are out there teaching. It's like, you're giving wonderful spiritual concepts, and this is great. It's helping shift consciousness to a degree. But if you're dealing with ascended masters, why aren't you teaching them the very simple anatomy that they're dealing with so they can create their own salvation? You're asking them to hand the power over to you to do it for them. That is not something that meets the standards of the animal order monkeys that I cloistered. They believe humans have the right to know what their anatomy is. They have the right to have the tools to regenerate their own consciousness and regenerate their own DNA. So that's why we do what we do. Okay, we'll get into 5 techniques to disengage visitor manipulation. If you think you're being messed with by something that is not in your own best interest, or even if you're wondering. Because if you're dealing with something that might be good but you're not too sure, and you disengage it, if it's something good, it will find a better way to approach you, so it calms your fears about it. Okay? If it's something negative, that's when it will fight you. You don't need to learn this, or you don't want to do that. They don't want you to learn how to protect your biofields because when your biofields are not protected, that's when you're an open target. And that's what they're going for right now. This is a huge drama we're involved in. I think a lot of people across the board in all of the movements that are popular now are forgetting, or not even forgetting, they just don't remember at all the scope of this drama. We're dealing with 15 dimensions of reality here. Each of those dimensions, and they go in sets of 3. It's called a harmonic universe. Each harmonic universe has many, many galactic systems in it. This is huge. There are thousands and thousands of races involved in this. So we think, well, ET contact, we're trying to figure out what it is. We're in the middle of a massive drama. And the more knowledge we have to posture ourselves, the stronger we will be and the more intelligent we will be. And if we do well with this, we will be able to stop the one world order agendas, not by fighting, by shifting the frequency of the planet out of their range. And that may sound like something far out, but if you didn't understand scalar mechanics, which I'm going to get into now, you start to realize we're all walking around in a unified field of energy. And everything inside of us is going to affect the things outside of us and vice versa. Each person holds a tremendous amount of power to affect the outcome of the dramas in the next number of years. Because you are a living energy field placed within a larger living energy field called the Earth body. If we can begin to realize that we are our bodies, our minds, our consciousness, our patterns of frequency, literal energy that can affect other energy, we start to get a sense of the real power that we have to make change. So by teaching people how to become empowered within themselves, that's how you save the world. The world saves itself one person at a time. It's not going to be done through revolutions and through, confronting the governments about, you're hiding things. Of course they're hiding things. This has been going on for thousands of years. It started back with the Church of Rome, when they started to distort documents. The Council of Nicaea, 25 AD, it took out 90% of the good books that were supposed to be part of the original biblical texts. When they started burning people like the Cathars, because they were teaching about the 2 Christ lineages and the 2 Gray Lines. If you look at the history that we have grown up as the foundations of our culture, it is not what you learn in the history books. They downplay what you learn in the history books. They make it generic and sugar-coated. But when you see what has been going on here, as far as the repression of information from the general populations, this has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. And that's why we're at the point where we are right now. So when we become aware, first you'll find, as the things I start to talk to you about, they'll start to sink in a little bit. And the first thing you might find, what I found when I saw the agendas they were running first was, I don't want to deal with this. I went into denial on it first. Like, okay, I know it's true, obviously. Can I do something else? Can I look someplace else? I didn't want to deal with it because it was so overwhelming at first. Then I moved through that. And I moved through it with just bringing more of my own spiritual consciousness and my own spiritual power. And then I went into being really ticked off. Not for me, but for the whole race. How dare they? And I remember some incarnations where I was part of ascension schools and the whole bit, where we were trying to bring back the trainings that have set people free. And watching what has happened to those trainings, and watching how hard we had tried, different groups of us in different time periods, incarnating in to bring the knowledge in to help people set themselves free, and then watching it get, wiped out completely. There was an anger attached there for a while, and you have to let that go too after a while. So if you find yourself moving through these things as you start to deal with the information that I'm presenting, that's okay. Let it move through. If you try to repress it, pretend you're not angry about it or not scared about it at first, then you're just repressing it and it makes it stronger, let it come out. Talk to yourself about it if there's nobody else you can talk to, because it's hard to go home and talk to your spouse if they weren't here to deal with this with you. A lot of times people have spouses or friends or family that are just not ET at all. They don't want anything to do with this stuff. That's crazy, wacky stuff. It's a fringe culture thing. They don't want to deal with it. You have to realize that you're not going to get a lot of comfort talking to them. You can still love them, and they can still love you, but they have their boundaries. And as long as you realize that, you'll kind of seek people who do have the awareness you have. Talk with them. And most of all, learn to talk with your own higher parts, because that's where the answers will come from, your own higher parts of identity. Okay? By the end of this workshop, we'll get into finding your spiritual core. And we're going to get into some of the exercises. And I'm kind of known in the New York area for doing these really strange, you could call them guided meditations, but they're more than that. They're making changes in your biofields. They're helping you to bring new frequencies in, higher frequencies of your own consciousness. So sometimes we go on journeys. And I don't want to just talk at you about how things work. I will do that, so your logical mind gets that. But you're not going to be able to own it and make it your own unless you begin to experience it. And that's why I tend to take people through these journey meditation type things. We call them meditations only because that's the only thing you can really compare them to out there as far as what's available. They're really bioregenesis techniques. Okay? So at the end of this, we will go on a journey, and I will do this spontaneously. I tend to send out a level of my own consciousness, because I'm aware on several different levels at the same time. I send out a level here and ask all of you on that level, what do you need most? So it's very spontaneous, so that part of it won't be planned. But in the meantime, we're going to try to get through everything that is planned. Which will be nice.
Good job.
Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the points that I did want to point out on is the earth scientists, they haven't discovered the sciences that I'm talking about. That doesn't mean they're not real. I hope that if there's people that are scientifically oriented out there, they'll start to say, okay, what if this is right? All the ancient cultures practice this, and the future cultures are practicing it. Maybe we're missing something. If they took this as the way it really works and tried to plug in what they know, they'd find the answers. Okay? But right now, some of the things you'll find support from science, some of the things you won't. That doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. I do. I've been trained for 28 years in the mechanics of these. But the most important thing is not proving to every physicist on the planet that this is how it works, so I can say, yay, I told you, this is how it works. What's most important is getting enough of it across to people, the layman of the world, so they can use it to make the changes in their own biological design and integrate their own higher consciousness. So that's why I'm not going to give you a physics course, and part of it I could, as far as particle physics and all that. I'm going to give you a framework, okay? Okay, let's see. We can go, I think, to the next one. Where are visitors? Yeah, I'm going to get into that in a minute. That's the next sheet after this. Okay. Okay, that was the one from the first lecture. There's another one coming. And what I'm going to try to do, if I can record it, I don't see how many people are here, but if you want them, I'll try to get them to use. These have technique in them, okay, they can take home and work with. They're still over at the so I have to get them forwarded for tonight. Okay. First of all, visitors, I think everybody at this point, because you've listened to me enough, knows that when we talk about angels in the ancient text, we were referring to the same thing they're calling ETs now. Now, we need to understand, okay, what are angels, ETs? What are these beings? To understand that, we need to understand a bit of the interdimensional framework, and that's what we're going to get into. Now, the visitors, I call them visitors, because instead of saying angels, ETs, all the time I just call them visitors. They come from a variety of different matter density levels, all right, within something called the time matrix. The time matrix is a scalar construction, and I'm going to get back to scalar and show you what a scalar is and how it builds up to form templates for manifestation. But we're dealing with a 15-dimensional time matrix that creates the basic structure that all manifestation in our local universal system takes place within. Within that 15-dimensional time matrix, there are 5 different matter density levels. We happen to live in one of them. The visitors come, some of them from these matter density levels. Some of them come from the matter density levels associated with the higher dimensional systems. Okay, now I'm going to show you, I have diagrams in here too to show you exactly what I'm talking about here. Now, to understand the locations that they come from, it's necessary to understand the basic template of how the universal system is structured, that 15-dimensional time matrix, and that's what I'm going to show you. Okay. Now, go through some. First of all, it's called a holographic template. Now this is what it's composed of. Before I show you the shape of it, I want to show you what it's composed of. Okay. These things here, is that, can you adjust that a little bit? Right here, we have something called part-chi, part-cum, and part-k. These are ultra-microparticle units. They are of such a small form that they are not detectable with the present instrumentation that science has available to it on Earth. Now, the part-chi, part-cum, and part-k form the basis. These are the basic units of energy, and they are conscious units. They are units of consciousness, units of conscious energy that form the templates upon which everything manifests. They start out as units of part-chi. Part-chi have something called part-chi phasing. It's a natural attribute of this energy form. It is a synchronistic movement of fission and fusion that takes place within the units. The fission and fusion creates the process of breaking down a part-chi unit into two smaller polarized units called a part-cum and a part-k. The part-cum units form the basis for particles in the particle universe. The part-k form the basis for antiparticles in the antiparticle universe. So we're dealing with units of energy, units of consciousness that cycle. They go through their own natural cycle of fission and fusion within themselves. They break down into particle and antiparticle and come back up together into what's called antimatter. It is a non-manifest matter. It is non-polarized. So these are the basic building blocks that are behind everything. Now, these building blocks, you have these units of consciousness. They begin to attract to each other by what's called like polarization. That means when they're in the phase of being broken down into polarity, the part-cum particles will draw more part-cum particles to them, and the same will happen with the part-k particles. They will first create strings, and it's kind of like the string theory that the physicists talk about. They will create strings of energy units, and those strings of energy units will progressively create more strings, and the strings begin to overlap and create grids. Okay? This is called a part-chi grid, and it is literally the fabric of electrotonal units, part-chi units, that undergo their fixed points. Each one of these little dots doesn't move anyplace. It just simply cycles and breaks itself down into two and then back into one, into two, into one. These grids form the templates upon which matter manifests. They first create, these are scalar templates. A scalar is a standing wave point. Okay? We have waves that move. We have waves that move, like frequency, different types of frequency move. Then there are other types of waves that just stand and flash on and off in the same place. That's what a scalar wave does. It flashes on and off in the same place, which I can't hold a study of. Okay. You have underneath all matter manifestation, this is what creates the dimensional structure itself. Before we enter it, you have a series of layers of these units of energy, units of consciousness, that hold still and flash on and off. They flash on into particle, antiparticle, and then they disappear and flash off into antimatter. So literally, everything in manifestation is flashing on and off. We just don't see it because it happens so rapidly and so slowly, depending on which level you're looking at, that it can't be perceived by the eye. And very little of it can even be perceived by scientific instrumentation at this time. Now, it's this process of creating scalar waves, standing wave grids. And the best way, I always use the analogy of a marquee. Did you ever see the old-fashioned marquees where they had like light bulbs all around the sign? And you could, the light bulbs didn't move, but they could make them flash in a certain sequence that made it look like waves of light moving. This is the same concept. These are the templates that matter and consciousness form on when they come into manifestation. Now, after the part-chi units, after the part-chi units build up to form the part-chi grids, which are like two-dimensional grids, they're not filled out in three-dimensional form yet, then they continue through accretion, which is bringing into themselves more light particles. they begin to fill out in dimensionalization. They begin to take on geometric shape and create what are called crystals, Keelan crystals. These begin to fill out the three-dimensionality of form. So behind your manifest particles, behind your subatomic level, you will have Keelons, and behind the Keelons you will have particle grid, and behind that you will have individual units of energy, of consciousness that came together to form those structures. It's a process of building up into manifestation. And there's a lot more physics to it. And it is very complicated. In the Catharba spiritual healing system, we get more into some of it. And I'm much better in writing when it comes to the heavy physics. This is enough. If you can understand, when I talk about scalar waves, I'm talking about fixed points of three-dimensional waves that stay in the same place and flash on enough to form the template that your particles and your consciousness build on. Now, the scalar waves don't just haphazardly arrange themselves. There are very specific mathematical, geometrical formulas that are inherent to how scalar waves will organize themselves in order to form a manifest system. When we are talking about a 15-dimensional time matrix, there are 15 different levels or layers of scalar wave configurations that interweave together to form a 15-dimensional time matrix, which is what is necessary to experience physical manifestation. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Now, we can remember when I'm showing you these shapes of how things look. I'm not saying you're going to look up in the sky and you're going to find these shapes like that. No, I'm saying these are the structures that the scalar waves, templates, take. These are diagrams to show you how they form. And a lot of these diagrams are actually spread out. It's all really taking place in the same space, all interwoven reality fields that are literally taking place in the same space. We get at a certain level of consciousness, when you hit D12 consciousness, you realize that space, time, and matter are just illusions. It's a hologram. But when we're down here, we have to work ourselves up to understanding what that means. So when I'm showing you structures, cosmic structures, for example, I'm showing you the scalar wave configurations, the templates that allow for this manifest experience to take place. What we have here are, I think I'll start over here. This is a 15-dimensional, can we get that a little less square, please? Yeah, I'm sure, I think it's the round knob up there. Oops, point that. Yeah. Yeah, that's clear. Much better. Yeah. This is a diagram that's used to illustrate the relationships between dimensions in a 15-dimensional structure. Okay? We have dimensions 1, 2, and 3. And then there's a band of polarity. And polarity means that the particles between this one, between D3 and D4, are rotating at different angular rotation of particle spin to each other, which creates a magnetic repulsion zone, which makes the reality fields separate from each other. So they're not intertwined. That's why we don't see them and they don't see us unless they know how.
They're spinning opposite each other?
It's not exactly that. There's calculations. For example, between each dimensional band, there's a 90-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin. When you get to every 3 dimensions, there's a 45-degree shift instead of a 90-degree shift. Okay, so it's a very complicated particle spin physics and that kind of thing. And to be able to talk about that in terms that would make sense to a physicist here, I would not only have to understand this level, I'd have to understand their physics jargon, because I've never taken physics classes down here. Everything I know is from what I have been taught through my, through 28 years of experience with the guardian lines. Technically, I have a 10th grade education. I figure I'm not doing too bad for 10th grade education, So, anyway, we have the 15-dimensional structure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. They're broken down into groups of 3 dimensions each. And each one of those sets of 3 dimensions is called a harmonic of manifestation or a harmonic universe. Each of those 5, we have 5, 3 each in the 15-dimensional matrix, each of those 5 harmonics of matter manifestation represents a different level of matter density. It also represents different time cycles. For within each one of these There are sets of time continuum. This larger cycle here, which would span these three dimensions here, is actually a time cycle that is called a Uego. They call it a Uego cycle. A Uego cycle, down in terms of Earth evolution, is 26,556 years. Within a Uego cycle, there are 6 smaller time cycles that are called time continuum. And I believe each one of those is 4,426 years. So there's a process by which the planet itself evolves through the different frequencies involved in the first, second, and third dimension, through moving through these time cycles. And at a certain point, now we can get into this, the process of evolution itself is the planetary template, just like everything has a scalar template, so does the planet. It draws into itself frequencies from each of the dimensions until it fills out within its form, within its template, all of the frequencies that are contained within the dimensional scale that it's passing through. At that point, it is able to pass into and evolve into the next set of time continuum. This is how your body works too. We grow through the process of accretion, frequency accretion. Our template, well, it's actually called a morphogenetic field if you want to get particular. That template of scalar waves is in the fetal pattern. We get part of it from the combined parent pattern and part of it from our incoming consciousness as a soul incarnate. It begins to draw to itself frequencies from the unified dimensional field around us. This is a unified field of energy here. It begins to pull in frequency into the template, and that progressively builds up and expands out the matter form. That's how we grow in time. That's how a planet grows in time. So when we're dealing with scalar mechanics, we're dealing with the core manifestation mechanics, the creation mechanics of how things are actually made and how they grow and where they go after they grow out of here. Go back to the...
So are you saying that in the first 3 that you have to get all 15 before you move to the next 3? Which ones are you pulling in?
Actually, I'll show you. I have a little bit more after I get through this one. There's a couple more, and then we'll get to, I'll say it real fast, and then I'll show you the chart on it later. Each dimensional band is a set of frequency bands composed of 12 sub-frequency bands. 12. So after you do 12, 12, 12, which is 36, you have accreted all of the primary frequency bands contained within that dimensional field, and you will therefore evolve and transmute into the next dimensional field to begin the accretion process in the next harmonic. Now, down here, in the matter, in the world's word, and we're in right now in dimensions 1, 2, 3, harmonic 1, that is the gross matter density. That's where what we call the particle pulsation rhythm is the slowest. The flashing on and off is the slowest. That creates a more solid, dense matter form. As we proceed up the dimensional scale in the harmonic 2, we get into what's called semi-etheric matter density. It is still physical. It's still a physical matter system, but the pulse of the particles is about twice as fast as it is here. So the density is about half of what we're walking around in down here. When we go up to the next level, in harmonic 3, we enter what's called etheric matter density. Again, it's faster. I'd have to go back through my notes to get the exact ratios. It has to do with the phi ratio. The particles flash out and out faster in harmonic 3, which creates what would look to us like a ghost matter. Like if a ghost comes in and has that like kind of two-dimensional, not quite solid look, that's what etheric matter density is like. But it is still, when you are stationed in that level of consciousness, you still experience an externalized hologram. You still experience matter perception, but you progressively know yourself as more and more and more a part of the unified field, where you no longer feel the division between the self and that self and that self, or this person and that tree. You begin to feel the living consciousness of the unified field. You begin to become it. And what you're doing is working your way out of matter density manifestation. Okay, when we get up to here, harmonic universe 4, that's dimensions 10, 11, and 12. We get into what's called pre-matter. And that's actually hydroplasmic matter density. It's liquid light, if you want to put it in simple terms. It is a pre-matter form that, even in etheric matter, you start to have form boundaries. Okay, a body stops here and the space around it is here. When you get into hydroplasmic matter density levels, everything is more like a fluid unified field, kind of like an ocean of consciousness that has a bit of density, and you can take on form, but you can also let it go. instantly. You know yourself as an eternal formless being that's capable of taking on forms if it so chooses. When we begin to embody that level of consciousness here, we progressively, you have to actually keep some of the DNA template turned off to hold that level of consciousness in the body, or you would turn into liquid light if you fully embodied the 12 dimensions of consciousness. When we get up to the 12th dimension, this is the transition point from the first level of what you could call matter, which is that pre-matter liquid. It's the cosmic soup, some people like to call it. Here's where you go into pure scalar form, where you go from dimension 12 into dimension 13. 13 through 15 takes you into thermoplasmic form, which is literally heat radiation. It's a form of radiation, it's scalar waves, again, those little particle things build up, forming materials. You're a template of consciousness in the form of pure sentient conscious radiation. You still know who you are. You still remember who you were in the lower density levels. You don't lose your sentience or your consciousness. So this is the process, or the structure, that we're actually evolving through. And it's drawn in this form so you can see the relationships. It's not that we're hanging in the middle of a form like that, it's hanging someplace. All right, this is the relationship structure. When we get into the bigger, how big is the universe, or the cosmos, these go in sets. There are many sets. Each one of these little guys would be one of these. Each 15-dimensional system actually has its counterpart. This would be a particle system, would have its counterpart, antiparticle system. And that would have its counterpart reflection of the two. And they actually go on 6 axes. So you have sets of 12 time matrices simultaneously running in each cosmic matrix. And there's not just one of those. Reality is huge. It is absolutely huge. And what's amazing about it is it all takes place in the same space. That's what it's going to take a while for our scientists to justify for us. But you know, you don't need scientists to justify it for you when you start to find that cognition through integrating your own higher dimensional levels of consciousness. Okay? Let's go on to the next one, please. This is to show you just a little bit closer, a little bit bigger. That is the 15-dimensional matrix. So you can see it a little clearer than it was on the other diagram. Now, this was the 15-dimensional matrix right here, okay? That is dimensionalized consciousness. Dimensional structure is formed by specific arrangements of the Keelan codes of the particle units that I showed, the little crystalline things. Certain specific geometrical relationships and mathematical relationships form the structure of dimensionalization. Beyond that, and actually within a different structure called the energy matrix, time matrices exist within the energy matrix. Now, the energy matrix is a large pool of scalar frequency that is not dimensionalized. It's not broken down in the same way as the time matrix is. It is when your consciousness is in this level, you simply know yourself as eternal consciousness without boundaries. And this is what people are aiming for when they're talking about ascension, talking about God and getting to be at one with God. They're talking about the process of integrating each part of their identity that's in dimensionalization, bringing it back into full expansion, so they go back into the eternal oneness and still know who they are. So this is the process that planets go through in their physics, the physics of their evolution. It's also the process people go through. And we can do it consciously or we can do it unconsciously, like we've been doing it for thousands of years unconsciously. It's not as hard to accomplish when you realize the basic structure we're evolving through. You have 5 harmonic universes, each with 3 dimensions. And around that, we have, or actually within which takes place, the 50-dimensional matrix takes place within the energy matrix, the pool of sentient, conscious energy that is not dimensionalized. There are 3 levels to that. The first is called the triadic level. And it has to do with the mathematical codings of how the particle units and scalar wave grids form themselves. You have the triadic level, then outward, expanding further. You have the polaric level, it went from 3 to 2. And then you have the achatic level, which is the first level of individuation at all from the whole, that some people call God, other people call the cosmos, whatever you call it. There is a whole energy field that all of this takes place within. And we are way down here in this little piece, down here right now. But it's all taking place within this massive energy area. So if we can understand the basic scalar structure that we're working with, we can start to understand the 15 dimensionals of excuse me.
Integrating the point-to-point thing with that grid that you had on the screen a while ago, this, as I move my arm, this is called walk across the floor. Am I walking through the grid, or is the grid stationary within my body?
The grid is actually, all right, when you're talking about this grid, where is it encoded? It's encoded in every unit of consciousness. And it's also the whole at the same time.
So then the scalar coding that builds me, I take it with me wherever I go.
Yes.
So if I leave Pittsburgh to get away from my ex-wife and go to San Francisco, I'm just taking my problem with me.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this is when we were dealing with the 15-dimensional matrix. I had mentioned that each of the dimensions was a set of frequency bands. This is the basic structure of the frequency bands. We have in harmonic universe 1, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Each one of those dimensions has 12 sub-frequency bands. Each one of those dimensions alone represents one full dimensional frequency band. So we're dealing with sets of frequency bands. And if we can understand that when our consciousness comes into manifestation, it's actually manifesting in the form of frequency. That is the form that consciousness takes on. It takes on energy form in the form of frequency, which is built upon scalar templates, in order to experience manifestation of any kind. Okay. So these are the basic. In the 5 harmonic universes, they have dimensional scale, and each one of those dimensions has 12 sub-frequency bands within it. Okay. Go on to the next one.
Can I,
Yes.
when you're talking frequency bands, are you talking any kind of frequencies that fall within our known physics as far as frequencies?
Actually, yes.
And what might they be?
This is one of the conversions that I'm trying to do as far as the known frequency spectrum. Most of the known frequency spectrum that we're dealing with is right in between these two. As far as the whole range of frequency that's been identified by science, is right between the mid to upper portions of D2 to the mid portions of D3 frequency. Okay, there is a whole massive spectrum of frequency that is taking place right around that. Those frequency bands are actually, that we know of, science knows those, are actually part of a larger frequency spectrum that science hasn't identified yet. Okay? And at some point I'm going to do it, but I haven't had time to show where their hertz are, where the gamma rays are, where all of that stuff corresponds. But I know that it does. Okay? We try to deal with the templates first, the basic structure. That would be considered details that are important. But when we're trying to deal with getting control of conscious evolution, the details you can plug in later. What you need to know is the blueprint. Okay, so we try to show the basic blueprint of frequency and how it goes. What a lot of it is being missed as far as frequency goes, they're picking up frequency within a spectrum of a certain angular rotation and particle spin, and they're completely not aware of or able to detect frequencies that are taking place in different systems that have different angles of rotation and particle spin. And the angular rotation and particle spin is really, if you have a particle, it has an axis upon which it spins. Okay? One axis may be vertical, one may be this way, one may be this way. They're all taking place in the same space, but they will be invisible to each other. So right now, science is identifying, let's say, the spectrum on the vertical axis. They're completely unaware of the other angular rotation or particle spin systems, so they're not aware of the frequency that's coming through. Does that answer the question? Yeah, and I'm going to be careful with questions. Sure. If I do the question thing, I'm never going to get through to the end.
Clear to me.
Okay, go on to the next. This one I basically wanted to show you for this graph over here. Okay, this was talking about particle phasing. And if you want to get more into the physics, I suggest taking the Kizara Biospiritual Healing System, because this is where you learn about a lot more of the physics, because it's how to use the body. They teach you a lot more about something called particle phasing and flash line sequences and all this kind of stuff that's really complicated. But this here is what I wanted to show you. It's the progression of the density levels for each of the dimensional structures in each of the harmonic universes, and the density type and the biology type that goes with it. So we have in dimensions 1, 2, 3, which is harmonic universe 1, we have carbon-based biology. That's the gross matter, physical matter density. In harmonic universe 2, dimensions 4, 5, 6, we have carbon-silica-based biology. And that's physical, really physical matter level 2, it's the semi-etheric matter. In dimensions 7, 8, and 9, harmonic universe 3, we have silica-based biology. So if you look, we're going from a carbon-based biology, transmuting the carbon elements into silica progressively, until we end up as silica liquid, crystalline liquid light, and then into standing wave scalar patterns, which are basically constructed on the template that we can find in elements of silica. So it's all very, very connected. We're in a process of evolving from carbon-based to silica-based. In harmonic universe 4, we have the crystalline liquid light, that hydroplasmic density level, which is liquid silica. And here, dimensions 13, 14, and 15, harmonic universe 5, we are standing wave patterns. We are scalar waves. So this is the reality system that we're a part of, and it's been so many thousands of years since we were taught this that nobody remembers, and it's the key to becoming free from being phase locked or having our minds locked into three-dimensional perception. We understand these things and how we plug into it. This is where we become empowered. We start to reclaim the parts of ourselves that are stuck in those other matter density levels. Okay, go to the next one, please. Now, where do visitors come from? Here's a basic chart that shows you, again, the 15-dimensional matrix. Okay. When we look up in the sky, we're seeing part of the morphogenetic template of the cosmic structure, okay? Now, if we can think of, if we look up in the sky, we see stars, we see space, we know what science tells us about that. But if we can also consider that, okay, we're looking at specific energy configurations within a morphogenetic field. If you can look at space as a morphogenetic field, a template, a scalar template, then it won't be so hard to realize that in different areas that we can look up and spot and give a name to, they actually correspond to different levels within that morphogenetic template. Here, in harmonic universe 1, we have basically, there's many other systems manifesting this system as far as harmonic universe 1 physical density, but our Earth system and all the planets in our solar system and a lot of others are affiliated with, they have their life field as far as their living life forms walking around on the planets down in harmonic universe 1. It would be Earth system. And when we get up in harmonic universe 2, in D4, it's associated with what we look up and see as the sun. In D5, we have Alcyone, the Pleiades. These are the frequencies that correspond. When you look up in the morphogenetic field in the sky, Alcyone on D5 has a life field. Right now, it looks like a star from down here. But from up here, it's a planet with living things on it. In D6, this corresponds into the galactic coordinates of the Sirius star system. In D7, it corresponds to the Arcturus area. D8, to the Orion system, but not the belt, that's up higher. Okay. D9, we have Andromeda. D10, Lyra. D11 is a part of Lyra that actually it blew up as a planet. It was called Avion. And it also had a twin planet called Aramatena, which was Earth's 12th dimensional counterpart. Okay. These are all systems that are up in our skies when you look at them. But they all have a place within the 15-dimensional structure of the universal template.
So that when we look at these dimensions, we can say Arcturus is probably, they can reform themselves because they're part of liquid light, but they're also whatever.
That's right.
Because they are in that dimension.
That's right. This is one of the keys to being able, if something says, I'm from the Pleiades, okay, so you know this, you're probably dealing with D5 consciousness. Okay. If it says it's from Orion, it's either D8 or up and through here, D13 through 15, which is usually associated with what's literally considered galactic core, because there's a place in the morphogenetic structure, the scalar structure of this time matrix, that you go through and come out into the energy matrix where you can enter other time matrices. And that place, at the center of that place, are the stargates in Orion's belt, and I think it's the center one, it's called Mintaka. in the planet that's called Mintaka, or the star that they call Mintaka on our charts. There are stargates in there that lead out, that after you go through the density levels, you would end up passing through those out into this level, the energy matrix, and from there, you could go into other time matrix systems. Okay?
But on the same dimension, if you went through a Stargate, like in dimension 8, wouldn't you still be in dimension 8, but only in a different space-time?
Kind of. It doesn't, you usually end up in parallel. Okay, there's a lot of dynamics going on. Remember, this is one 15-dimensional time matrix. It has its double. It has its anti-particle field. So you end up going back and forth between them until you accrete all of the dimensional frequency bands. Then you can expand out into here. But until that, you're really trapped within the D8 mode, or whatever dimension you're coming through on. Right here, we're trapped in the D3 mode. And on the other side of that, we go through the portals, we end up in parallel Earth. Okay? So there's a process of having to accrete frequency before you can make passage, go through and come out in D8 some other time matrix. There are passages that connect them, but it depends on what coding you carry, literally, in your own morphogenetic template, whether or not you'll be able to pass them. That's what the whole concept of ascension was all about. If you had enough of the coding activated in your DNA template, you would be able to pass through the stargates that link all through these systems, and you could become free. You could move out of gross matter density and up through and become, pure ascension consciousness again, and expand beyond time, space, and dimensionalization out to the energy matrix, into alignment. So ascension is directly connected to this. But there is a specific, just like there is a specific structure to how the scalar grids of the universe are made, there is a specific structure to how ascension works. And there's a lot of technique that's being taught right now. It's supposed to be ascension technique that isn't, because they're not teaching you about the structure of the 15-dimensional matter. So this is why we teach this kind of thing. Down in here, again, there is the little time matrix that shows what would be taking place in one of the harmonics, your Nuego time cycle with your 6-time continuum. So that goes right over through there. Okay, we can go on to the next one. I'm throwing a lot at you here. Okay, so I think it will be very helpful if you can get these packets, and if I can get them to you, at minimal cost, I will do that, because I think if you take this with you and you work with just even the exercises in here, you'll be very, very happy that you did. Okay, this is the ancient stellar races that have been involved with humanity. I'm not going to go through every one of these because we'll be here for the next 3 days. But the basic ones of what I wanted to show. We start with the densities again. We have harmonic 4, which is dimensions 12, 11, and 10. That's that pre-matter liquid light. Then we have harmonic universe 3, etheric matter, harmonic universe 2, semi-etheric, harmonic universe 1, physical matter. Okay? There's a lineage that the humans came out of, that our human lineage came out of. There is a lineage that, can you make that a little less blurry by any chance? There's a lineage, I'm going to have to use this off here because it's a little bit too small. Is this too small for you to see up here? Yeah, so this is better off, looking at it. I basically want to show with this chart that there's a lineage of, there's a lineage of not only genetic connection, but consciousness connection up and down the dimensional scale. To get down into the matter density levels that we're a part of, has that anybody?
It depends which part.
Yeah.
The center's focus, the outside is.
Right.
It's a non-linear thing.
Okay, this chart you can look at better, with the chart box. But what I wanted to point out with here is, to get down here as an incarnate, it implies you had to come down through some type of template in the higher dimensional octaves. This is where our whole race has its lineup through different interstellar races. We have come out of something called, you can't see it up there, it's called the Elohai family. That was a templated consciousness in harmonic universe 4 in the pre-matter liquid light states. They created races of beings in harmonic universe 3 in the etheric matter densities. They created, for one, the Lyran Syrian Anahazi race, which was the original, that's our first template, the first part of our DNA template formed from the Lyran Syrian Anahazi template. They also created a bunch of other things, but we're just talking about our lines here. In harmonic universe 2, the Lyran Syrian Anahazi created another group of beings, and this is where you'll understand why people are buying things and making checks out to Azure Temple. In harmonic universe 2, the Anahazi, Lyran Syrian whites, created a race called the Syrian blues. They didn't call them blues, they're called Azarites. And they have blue skin. They're a Syrian race that has blue skin. And if you look at some of the ancient paintings from Egypt, you will see beings with blue skin. They weren't just being colorful. They weren't trying to use blue to represent something else. The ancient Egyptians dealt directly with them. And most of the, at least the good guy, Azarites with the blue skin, are from Sears B. And they're the ones that are working with the guardian lions. Okay? They are part of the original human, as humans started as ET and worked their way down into what we call human here. Okay? Now, the Azarites and the Anahazi combined to form a pattern called the Orophim. The Orophim were the host race that held 24 to 48 strand templates. That means they could hold the whole 15-dimensional structure, its other 15-dimensional structure, and 3 levels of the energy matrix. They could accomplish full ascension out of the time matrix. That was the original host race in Harmonic Universe 2 that all the other stellar races, the primary 12 other stellar races, had part of their coding put into to form what was called the human. They called it the Turanissime. It had a 12-strand imprint, and after that 12-strand, it could transmute into the Orophim imprint and progressively transmute out of the matter density levels, going up through its Azarite imprint, up through its Amhazi imprint, and back into its Elohai family of consciousness. So there's a whole progression here of genetics and consciousness that's been going on. If we can understand at least our basic lineage, we won't get hijacked by some of the lies that are being told by the intruder races, like the Anunnaki. They love to come in here and say, you were aged and we made you into something. Sorry, it didn't work that way. That's one of the lies they like to tell here. Why? Because it puts us in a position of subservience and also that parental awe. Long-lost parents, that kind of thing. They play on this. They didn't create us from apes. We weren't created from apes. Many of the ape forms were created from us. That's what the Darwinian theory doesn't recognize, that there was an original human imprint that many of the animal forms actually came out of. It wasn't the other way around. Evolution is very tricky when you realize that time is simultaneous. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? They all came at the same time. Kind of thing. So I won't even try to explain deeper into that because I'll be here for another 5 hours. But if we can understand, we have a heritage. And right now, we're in a predicament where there are 2 groups of interstellar visitors that come from over here that don't want us to remember that heritage because they want to keep a lid on us so they can keep control of the Earth's territories and stargates here. Or we can acknowledge that we have this lineage right here. We get our 12-strand pattern that can transmute to a 24, to a 48, and all the way out of the time matrix. That is the heritage of the human lineage. And it's about time somebody out there stood up for them down here because we've been manipulated for so long that most people have no idea that this is the structure of reality we've come out of. That's what I'm trying to teach the basic things here. Now, when we come down to Harmonic Universe 1, we had the Orophim who created the Turanissime, original humans. They created the 12 tribes. This is what was originally meant by the 12 tribes. They weren't just 12 tribes of Jewish people that was from Israel. They were 12 different tribes of humans. There were 7 root races, 7 root races and 5 cloister races. The root races were working on the evolution of 1 strand template. For the cloister races, each root race would have a cloister race with it, would serve as the host race. It would have strands 7 through 12 in the templates for those, plus the strand that the root race was working on. And together, they would complete the building up in the species morphogenetic field of the 12-strand template. Right now, we're part of the 5th root race. Most people on the planet that are hybrids are part of the 5th root race, the Aryan root race. And Aryans come in all colors, black, white, yellow, red, brown. They're all part of every root race. So it's not one root race was just this color or just that color. When we get into the cloister races, this is where we're talking the grail lines, okay? The grail lines, the holy grail lines, a lot of people like to determine that. They were the hybrid ones that were brought back. Now originally, the cloisters walked simultaneously with the other root races. But because there's been so much manipulation here, many times the cloister imprint was dissolved to the point where it was almost non-existent, which means the races down here would have lost the potential to have 12-strand evolution. So there would be interstellar interference or help. And the Anunnaki would come in and try to mess up the evolution, where the Elohai families would come in and orchestrate more hybridization programs to put back the 12-strand pattern. That's what the whole Christ story was about. There are actually two Christs. One of them was half Nephilim, which is part Anunnaki. He had a 9-strand template, and they were trying to evolve the Anunnaki contaminated humans. And the other one had the 12-strand template. And they came in at the same time. One came in 12 BC. We call him Joshua 12 for short, because he was a 12th level avatar and had the 12-strand pattern. And then there was Joshua 9. They both had the same name. It was spelled a little different. And one of them, Joshua 12, was actually out of the Constantine lines. And there is a lot of very interesting history there, because the Roman Church buried all knowledge of the two Christs. They made it illegal. They burned people at the stake for talking about it. And they got rid of most of the records, except the ones that are still held up in the Vatican. So there's a whole lineage here. The Christed rail lines were the lines that of the hybrid programs that were brought back in to keep alive the possibility of 12-strand evolution for the races on Earth. Because if they didn't come back in, if they hadn't been brought back in, this place would have been overrun by the Nephilim reptilian race strains or by the Anunnaki race strains. So the Cloisters have always been hunted for that reason. If you look at our history, you will see usually the races that were, burned at the stake, outlawed, they were heretics, they were evil. They called them everything in the book because they weren't buying into the mind control patterns that were being run here, because they knew better. They had access to higher levels of information because they had more active gene codes, and they tried to bring the truth back, and they could be persecuted for it. But this time, the truth is going to stick. It has to do with the balancing of the cycles. This time, as we move through the stellar activation cycle, it is the dawning of a new age. This time we go into a higher frequency, which means this time the light holds. And the ones who are running the dark agendas, no matter how hard they try, and they may make it rough for us at first, they're not going to be able to maintain their positions. So it's not as bad as it seems when we look at the One World Order agendas. Now over on this chart, I also have, which I'll show you really quick on this side, it's called the Seraphi families. One of those families is called the Seraphim. They're called the fallen Seraphim. And again, when you look at light densities, they created, the fallen Seraphim over here, they created the draconian matrices and the draconian lines that became the Zetas and a bunch of other ones. There's actually a group of draconians that got involved with the Azarites and created a bunch of what they call dark angels. They're blue angelic type beings, but they're very nasty, and they have reptilian coding. So not all the Azarites managed to pull through, in pure form. The ones we are working with are out of the Elohai family, and they're here to bring back that lineage or try to help people remember who they are. These guys, they're still representatives of them on the planet. That's where you get your Zetas and all those guys, and you get your Draconians and your Dracos. Over here, we have the digressive families of the Elohai families of consciousness. They're called the Elohim. Not all Elohim are negative, but you'll find this word thrown around lots in the New Age. What most people don't realize is certain groups of Elohim, called the Anu Elohim, are totally One World Order agenda, and they're trying to get control over the place. They created Anu, which was a consciousness collective in etheric matter among universe tree, and that created the Anunnaki races down in through here. So the Elohim, the Anu Elohim, were responsible for the whole Anunnaki problem. They decided they didn't want to be part of the Elohai families anymore because they didn't want to follow the law of one. They were more interested in playing creator gods and trying to dominate everything. So if you get involved in the New Age movement, or if you know people who are, help to gently point out to them that not all Elohim have your best interest at heart. Yes, you're connected to them as a human through the Elohai, but that does not necessarily mean you came out of these lines. And they're trying to hybridize people back into the Anunnaki lines, and that is a violation of the Emerald Covenant, which promised humans could evolve back into what they originally were. Okay? So those are the basic lines. That's why I have that chart in here to show us some of our affiliations. Hopefully, here we go. We'll move to the next one.
Question. So when we pray, who's listening?
The part of ourselves that never left it one with God.
So, or oversoul?
Well, actually, when we get into in workshop 3, oversoul would be the part of ourselves that corresponds to harmonic 3. Mm-hmm. Above that is our avatar, above that is our rishi, and above that are 3 levels of ascended
So it's
mastery.
all part of ourselves that is?
Yeah.
Same for spirit guides?
I aim for the Akadic level, which is that last level of individuation before full expansion where you don't have individuation anymore at all. The Akadic level of self, the God seed. When I send prayer or communication, or whatever you want to term it, to the higher levels. I do it through my goddessy level, the one part of me that never left at home, because we all have a part. And that's what some of our tapes do. They try to build the energy connection between this level of consciousness and that level of consciousness.
And our spirit guides are all part of ourselves up on the higher levels.
Some of them are parts of ourselves, some of them are parts of other matrices. Okay, I mean, some of the spirit guides are like send-ins from another family of consciousness. Some of them are ones that are saying they're spirit guides, but they're really infiltration from the other levels. That's why when we do the Mahart seal technique, this will block out those that aren't part of your family matrix, the ones that are trying to mess with you. Because anything can come in at D4 or D5 and whisper in your ear and say, I am the voice of God, or I'm your higher self. You know? How are you going to tell the difference? You have to take their word for it. But you don't. If you know the structure and you know how to protect your fields from that kind of thing.
That presumes a choice because all of us, or most of us, have the genetic strains from the others. So it projects a choice. You must decide, I will pick this team.
Yes. That's what the beauty of the human form is, though. No matter what matrix of consciousness or how distorted it might have been in higher levels, once a being is incarnate in a human form, that human form, no matter how messed up its gene code is, still has the potential of regenerating the 12-strand pattern, disconnecting from the distorted matrix, and making its own direct connection to source. It can consciously evolve and not be under the control, not be a little puppet on the string of the higher distorted matrices. That's one of the biggest things that the negative matrices don't want people here to know. If their people knew what was going on, if you knew, say, for instance, that you were an incarnation of a draconian, let's say, if I was a draconian, and I found out the draconian matrix is running a nasty agenda that's violating people, I wouldn't care if I was an incarnate out of that matrix or not. I'd tell them to stick it. I said, excuse me, I'm not going to honor that agenda. I have a right to choose my own. This is what they don't want their people down here to know. Because once they're in human form, if they find out what that means, they can become free, and they progressively lose more of their energy. They use their people. An incarnate that comes through as a draconian is just a person that's three-dimensional. They don't let you expand into the higher strand content, into the higher perceptions. They just run you around and use you to feed energy. They're like energy vampires. Once a human being that's being used in that way finds out what's going on and starts using bioregenesis, they sever that connection. And they lose feeders. So that's why they don't educate their people.
So do they do this like with government and abusive family patterns, and you think that it's really you, but it's somebody else telling you what to do, and it's how your family always was, and
It's kind
all
of
that
part
stuff?
of it. It's part of it. It also has to do with who we are karmically. I mean, karmic is a pattern, it's a template that comes through with our consciousness when we move from one life experience to another. It's actually a lead through because they're all simultaneous, all of our incarnations. If there are portions of us that are draconian consciousness, let's say, they have distorted scalar patterns that manifest as distortions in the DNA, that manifest as distortions in being able to understand things down here. We can override those things. I'm trying to bring this around. This is a whole, like, bigger thing that I go off on that tangent.
Yeah, but if we don't really understand things thoroughly, how can we go on to the next thing? Can you just kind of get it over here?
Yeah. Well, if I look at it this way, I have technically about 2.5 hours. If I go into every little piece really deep, we're not going to get past page 4, probably.
I know, but like you skimmed over, you said there were 2 Christs, one was a 9 and one was a 12,
Yeah.
and then you left it. I mean,
Yes, I did. Well, if you want to learn more about that, you can read Voyagers too, because it's in the Secrets of
there.
Humanity.
Okay.
Yeah, there are other pieces of this. I'm not going to, like I said in the beginning, I've given 12 workshops of progressively more information that's even contained in the books. Okay? There's no way I'm going to be able, they were 6 hours each. Some of them went to 8 hours. There's no way I'm going to be able to give that to you, even in a full-day presentation. So there's going to be other pieces, but what I'm trying to do, there are pieces missing that you're going to need to fill in the blanks. But there's going to be, there will be tapes available from those if you want them. We're getting them ready hopefully for fall. We've videotaped all of the workshops. So if you want to learn more about a particular area, there will be information in workshop format on it. Okay? So I'm not trying to, like, to poo-poo your questions and, like,
Right.
not answer them. I just have to kind of get through this program.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. This is interesting. Pull that down just a little bit to show the top. Okay. Parallel and inner relationships. All right. This basically shows us, when I talk about A lot of people that talk about parallel or inner earth, the scientists kind of go like, yeah, right, one of those airheaded people that don't know what they're talking about. It's a difference in frequency spectrum. If we look at our dimensional scale in the particle universe running this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, second harmonic, 7, 8, 9, etc. up. Inner earth starts at where our 0.5 would be, where our dimension 1 starts down here. This starts in a little bit higher frequency, and it runs on a half step next to ours. When we get over to parallel earth, this is running a full dimensional frequency band above or ahead of ours. So you see where our D2 is? That's where parallels D1 starts. So there's this correspondence between the inner earth, the earth, and parallel earth. But if you can understand it, there's a difference in frequency. You're not going to dig down and hope to find inner earth. You're not going to get a big bulldozer out and try to dig through to China and find inner earth in there. Because what you need to do is shift 45 degrees negative rotational particle spin. That's how you find inner earth. And if you want to go to parallel, you shift 45 and 45, 90 to get over there. So it's a difference in particle spin rotation ratios.
That really helps, because in the book it's D this and that. This is great.
Yeah, I wanted to put this in the book, but I didn't have time to do this graph because to meet the publishing deadlines. Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah.
My publisher's ready to strike me these days. I'm like 3 weeks overdue on the new stuff I'm supposed to put in for the second printing. Okay, then here's a little diagram that kind of shows you the angle of rotation. If these were particles, you'd have Earth's particle axis here, okay? Right there. Then you'd have inner Earth, 45 degree shift. Then you'd have parallel Earth, 90 degree shift from here, right? When we get to Tara, these are time cycles moving in the opposite direction. So you'd have 45 degree shift up that way. It's actually in a reverse rotation. It would give you the particle axis of Tara, and then inner Tara would be there, and parallel Tara would be there. Gaia actually runs, their harmonic actually runs on the same angular rotation particle spin, but it has a gap in between it, so we don't see what's happening in harmonic 3, because harmonic 2 is in the way as a polarity zone. It's like a space between objects, so negative space zone. So these two you could consider as positive space. This one's negative, so these two don't see each other because that was in between. That's a quick way to do it. There's a lot of physics involved with this, some of which I can't even explain. This gets so sophisticated numerically and with formulas. I don't like numbers personally, and I would leave that up to the physicists. Right now, the Guardian Lines will not give us those formulas, because if they were let loose on the planet right now, the government people would destroy this place within months by having that information. They go for the stargates. They don't know how to run stargates, and they wouldn't care that they don't know how to run. They try to figure it out as they went along, and they probably blow the planet up in the process. That's why they're showing individuals how to begin to understand the structure, and eventually the formulas to plug it in, which regular physics will be given. But right now, they'd have to be crazy to hand over that kind of power to the human condition while there's 2 one world order agendas running. Okay? So the people who want to work with spiritual growth as well as gaining power are the ones who will be given pieces, more and more pieces of the information. You'll be the ones that get it first, before the physicists do. Unless you happen to be a physicist who's interested in spirituality, then you could vote. Okay, can you go to the next one? Primary methods of visitor contact. Okay. Okay, can somebody give me a time check just so I don't run over? Is there anybody monitoring that? Oh, that's great. Oh, good. I can still keep going. Under the hyper pressure of that 1 hour thing that I knew I wasn't going to. Okay. 8 primary methods of visitor contact. There's a number of ways they contact us, and one of the most common is through pre-birth arrangements. Most of the people that are being contacted, even if it's by the negative agenda ones, they have pre-arranged contact agreements because they incarnated out of those soul matrices. So the people who are incarnating out of the Elohai families, they are being contacted to help them wake up so they can remember who they are and get on with what they came to do. Same thing with the people involved with the Draconians, and same thing with the people involved with the Anunnaki. What's rough is, if you wake up and realize you're Anunnaki, and that's wonderful until you realize what they're trying to do here. Then it's like, wait a minute, you may be family, maybe I incarnated as a member of you, but I'm going to rethink my contract. Just because you made an agreement while you were under a mind control, collective mind arrangement, and then came into individuation down here in human form, you now have the right to choose your agenda. And you are not a bad person, you are not considered, you are not judged by the universe at large for whatever is in your gene code. Once you're here, you get a clean slate. It's time. If you have the awareness of what's happening, you can make your choices and you can give yourself that clean slate. You don't have to fulfill a birth agreement and say you were part of a draconian matrix and they said, well, we're going to do a one world order takeover plan down there and you're going to incarnate as part of our army. You can get down here and finally realize what's happening and say, wait a minute, I don't think I like that plan after all. Those matrices don't allow their incarnates to have consciousness of the higher dimensional things. They leave them, kind of deaf, dumb, and blind. So they're puppets. Once the puppets wake up, they don't have to play games with the puppet masters anymore. And that's what's happening here. So pre-birth arrangements are kind of neat. I came in on one of those, and I came in with a specific pattern that would allow me to do conscious fetal integration specifically so I could tell people about it, so I could remember it, and so I could tell people that I could walk them through it, tell them what it feels like, and help trigger that memory in other people by sharing my memory of it. If it wasn't a valid memory for me, I wouldn't be able to transmit the consciousness of that to you. But I think most people could sense that I mean it when I say that. And I could take you right back to the first 8 cells at the base of the spine, which is a whole other workshop on advanced Kundalini awakening, so I won't go into it. But the pre-birth agreements are really neat because we all have a contract somewhere. Even people that are on root race contracts, that are not part of the hybrid races, that are not having active contact, they come in with soul agreements too. Soul agreements to fulfill their next stage of evolution. They choose their parents. We all choose our parents. We choose them for a specific reason, even if it was a horrible experience. I mean, sometimes you just don't get along with mom or dad, and most times it's because of what's happening in other space-time frames that may not be too pleasant. But we all make these choices, and we have the ability to reclaim that knowledge if we begin to remember who we are. The pre-birth arrangements right now that are running most predominant are the ones that are run as the indigo children by the Emerald Order. The indigo children are hybrid strain. They're the original humans, but they're amped up humans. They have the Orpheum imprint, that original host-raised imprint, so they not only contain the potential of 12 strands, they can, if they fully awaken, do 24 to 48 strands. This means that they're capable of transmitting energy directly into the planetary grids to change the scalar wave templates of the planetary grids. They're coming in primarily to make sure this planet makes it through the stellar activation cycle between 2000 and 2017. If they weren't incarnating here, there's nobody else that has DNA activated high enough that can run 48 dimensions of frequency, or 48 levels of frequency, through to recode the grids. If the planetary grids were left the same way as they are right now, which is the same pattern that 200,000 years ago, 210,000, 216 years ago, when this place went into pole shift, the last stellar activation cycle, that same imprint, that same scalar configuration that caused the pole shift then, would have just naturally flipped over and caused it here. So there's major plans in operation in the higher dimensional fields to stop that from happening here. And great success has been done so far. There's been several major events that we're not getting the warning out, like it's not time to, go hide under things and start, praying because it's all hopeless. It's not. It's not at all. But people with pre-birth arrangements with the guardian groups are usually here, not just for the personal evolution, it has to do with that, but they're here to help the planet. They're here to help run frequency, to recode the scalar templates of the planetary fields, so everybody can make it through this period without too much aggravation or getting wiped out or anything like that. Now, you can tell a lot. There's certain exercises. Some of the ones in here will help, and some of the ones we're going to do on Sunday, we'll get right into the fetal integration thing. Because this is where you start to find your birth contracts, what matrix you came out of, what you came to do, and that's where you get to decide if you still want to do this or am I going to choose to do something else. Because you have free will. That's your divine spiritual right. Okay. So there will be technique to get you into that memory space. Now, another method of contact is the obvious physical visitation, where they come in with the ships or they manifest. I don't know if any of you have had contact where, forget the ships, they just pop up in your room. Has anybody ever had that? Okay. They can be anything from little grays to very tall, nice-looking humans to anything in between. And they do direct manifestation. Why? Because they have control over the DNA template. They know they have it activated, and they can create something called Merkaba, which is a configuration in the bioenergetic field, a very specific configuration of the ratios between electrical and magnetic spin that creates what's called a vehicle of light and sound. It's a scale-up configuration that changes the way the chakra system works. It changes the angular rotation of particle spin. So you can literally disappear and pop up someplace else.